Welcome to episode 95 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast Making Plays. I am Blaze, your host, and in this one, we are analysing the Sydney Swans. After a tumultuous 2024 grand final defeat at the hands of the Brisbane Lions, Sydney went into a very rough 2025. A boatload of injuries came their way, and just a real weird lack of form in a lot of players as well. They brought in, obviously, Dean Cox was elevated to head coach as well, so brand new coaching structure at the same time. It was a very messy year for the Swans. They did kind of start to fix it up towards the end. However, it was not to be for their finals chances. But will 2026 be entirely different? That's what we're here to talk about. But first of all, how are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Not too bad, not too bad. Yeah, feeling good. Yeah, probably recording the last bulk of the episodes, either all of them or all but one today. So I am glad to finish the recording of these because I've had fun writing it. But yeah, as I said, just having that free time after doing it feels good.
Yes.
But also, as for the Swans, I've got no real preamble. Although I was walking the dog when I was house sitting, as you would saw in the last Richmond and Port Adelaide episodes. And I was walking around the lake, and I was walking a bit closer to the lake than I thought, because yeah, I was crossing through, and there was like a little brooding nest that I didn't realize, and Big Papa Swan came up with me to me with his neck up. He was not happy bringing a little papa to the little cygnets, and I had to do that little fast little away where you don't want to look at them directly because they'll think you're trying to confront them. But you also don't want to act too scared because then they're like, "Oh, I can finish this fool off." So I did like a little shuffle away. The dog was keen, which I was thankful. I was like, "Please don't like try to pick a fight against this one because look, you're on your own at that point." I hate my aunt's not listening, but I would have abandoned Banjo to go fight the Swan if he was trying to pick a fight with it. Maybe not, but anyway. Swans are scary. The Sydney football team, we will analyse where their strengths and their long neck intimidation factor might come from this year. How about you,
Yes.
Blazy, there?
I'm not doing too bad. Feeling a little tired today because I had to be up quite early to not miss my sleep schedule too much for work. But so I'm kind of on like I'm probably gonna go to sleep once we finish recording these. Let's be real. But I'm very much looking forward to getting through this bulk recording and finishing off the preseason analysis series. It's been a lot of fun. Getting through all of these, getting to really kind of dive deep into where each of these teams are currently sitting going into the 2026 season, and kind of to also just get to talk a little bit more about like the more analytical side of the game in general, rather than just like a kind of like an overall kind of thing, which has been really good. But we will jump straight into the Swans, and we'll jump over to how their 2025 went.
Yeah, and it started off a bit rough with Hawks and Lions losses both at the SCG. A bit disappointed they didn't get it done at home. They beat the Dockers and the Kangaroos, and then in the mid-season is really where it went apart, losing to the Magpies, Power Suns, and Bombers of all team. That was when they was just starting to get injured. And then, yeah, disappointing loss to the Demons, disappointing loss to the Crows. And then they were respectable. They were mainly beating lower teams, but they still managed to win against the Dockers. There was that horrid game against the Giants where they started off like a house on fire, and then after half times, the Giants absolutely walked over them. But they finished off with a win against the Lions too, but it really just wasn't enough to make up for a pretty lackluster start of the season. Their movement, losing Goulden, whatever Cox tried to do, it just looked a bit jankier. They never really got a smooth passage of plays. They were very reliant on Isaac Heaney for their goal kicking, whereas as their tall forwards, they really were hot potato in form, as you saw in my preseason thing, whatever you call it, the intro screen. Yeah, the combination of Marty, Logan McDonald, and Hayden McLean just couldn't produce enough. A few injuries also hampered that. Marty missing, I think, the last half of the season, and what's his name, McDonald, a bit the first. So yeah, it was just yeah, a season for the Swans. Nothing really consistent. Not too many impressive wins, although a couple of things. Well, they'll keep their head at least a bit high. They're not too far off the pace, but they're definitely off what they were in 2024.
Yeah, they were so it's very much a season that really tested more of their depth rather than and tested, I won't say like the tested the mettle of Dean Cox. Obviously when a new head coach comes in for their first season, you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt as to whether it's going to be a good or a
Yeah.
bad season, because different could be a different coaching structure that you're trying to work with. You could be in a period where you're rebuilding, that sort of thing. There's multiple coaches within the past couple of years, obviously, that are currently kind of going through the same thing. Josh Carr will probably go through something similar this season. So there's a little no, there's like nothing wrong with what Dean Cox has done for 2025. Like he also had to deal with a ton of injuries as well. So
Yeah.
like it was kind of a weird season for him to get started with.
Yeah. I don't know if it was a ton. Like, I think it was Goulden specifically, but
Golden was the big one.
it's just 2024 was pretty injury free, so I think they got more towards average, and then some of their depth got exposed.
They were missing Papley for a lot of it as well. Now that I remember.
Yeah, Papley was pretty big too. Yeah. But anyway, we'll go to the stats, and you'll see. Obviously, from last year, it's a significant drop off. They were still not the most statistically first team ever to be had, but they were a bit better than this. But it's not abysmal either. We'll start off their offense, where they probably struggled the most. Their goals were 11.5 per game, which is 13th in the league. Inside 50s, 52.3 per game, 11th in the league. And shots per game, 25.6, 10th in the league. Their accuracy absolutely nosedived after last year at 44.9%, 15th in the league. Goals per inside 50, also pretty below standard, 22, 13th in the league. And their inside 50 retention rate, their kicks inside weren't that great, 46.2, tied 12th in the league. And their chance to score was just reasonable, 28.8, tied 9th in the league. Where they did excel was defensive half to score transition, going D50 to score 10.4, 5th in the league, defensive half to score 13.7, tied 5th in the league. They were pretty good at this last year too, so that's not that big a surprise, but they just didn't really have enough forward half pressure or attributes to really capitalize on this. We'll go to offensive one-on-one wins now, 26.6%, 11th in the league. 1v1s going at a rate of 10.5 per game, which is 13th in the league. Marks inside 50, 11.6, tied 11th in the league. Mark inside 50 rate, 22.1, 10th in the league, which I gotta say is pretty poor when you're running 3 tolls, I would say. You just need to be a bit better there, because their ground level stuff was just average. Tackles inside 50, 10 per game, 14th in the league. And ground ball inside 50 gets 15.3, 7th in the league. So they crumb all right. But as I said, probably that tackling pressure by running 3 tolls and having Papley missing was a bit rough.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, we talked about it throughout the season, that their structure that they were just kind of amalgamating wasn't working. Obviously, this is why they've brought in Curnow. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. Then also the fact that you're missing one of your big-bodied smalls in Papley, who's kind of always been the head of pressure in the forward line. Him missing definitely didn't help at all for a lot of the season. And then like having to rely on players like the Lizard having to play up forward rather than staying in defense where he's more prominent, probably didn't help in just this amalgamation kind of not being that useful with cleaner hands on marking or even just pressure on ball in general.
And the most concerning thing too is their leading tackler inside 50. Well, I should say shared because Clayton Cleary is apparently on the same. Will Hayward on 1.3. So they lose their top tackler inside 50. And as I said, I will say Justin McInerney sort of played that role. He had a bit of a weird season, it's fair to say. Where, as I said, he did provide a lot of that ground ball pressure and a bit of a link up. But I just don't think he has enough scoreboard impact to really play that role. Well, I mean, he played a fine role, but they need another player to make up in terms of that scoreboard impact that Papley normally has. So, yeah, it was just awkward.
Yeah, I agree.
Going on to defense now, and I would say that they're, you know, not too bad. I think I've left a stat from last year because I don't think I focused much on X score. Anyway, their points against was 12 in the league. 12 per game, which is 11th in the league. Opponent shots were limited to 25, which is tied 10th in the league. Goals per inside 50 for opponents, 23.3%, which is 8th in the league. Score per inside 50, 44, 10th in the league. That's all for the opponents. So it's not terrible. They, for how mediocre some of their defenders are, they still manage to contain it enough. So I will say there's a bit of a positive there. Opposition inside 50 retention rate still going about middle of the pack, 46.8, tied 8th in the league. Opposition chain to score 20.8, which is 10th in the league, pretty much the same as their chain to score. Opposition marks inside 50, 11 in the league. 11 per game, which is 8th in the league. Opposition mark inside 50 rate, 21.2, which is 7th in the league. Opposition inside 50 ground ball gets 15th in the league, tied 10th. Where they did sort of do well is, again, in that back half structure. Their opponent score from stoppage is 30.3, which is 4th in the league, and their opponent score from defense, 29.7, 5th in the league. But they caused a bit too many turnovers that got punished the other way. Opponent score from turnovers was 48, 11th in the league. And their defensive one-on-ones is nothing really to say anything about. 30.8, 14th in the league. Defensive one-on-ones only was at 9.7, 16th in the league. So their defensive structure wasn't really exposing them to that many. And their opponent forward 50 ground ball gets was 15, 10th in the league. So pretty much a bang-on average defense. Maybe a bit below, but they have below average players in their defense. So, well, at least like pure defensively. They've got some good rebounders. Nick Blakey, obviously, fantastic. If he can focus on rebound, they'll be very well off. Same with Callum Mills. But yeah, as I said, Tom McCartan is still doing well enough. But yeah, a bit patchy. As I said, Rampy and Rampy's just dropped off a bit. Obviously, Lloyd doesn't really play much of a defensive role anymore, and they're sort of playing Sam Wicks as like that smallish defender to middling results, I would say.
Yeah, it's their defense definitely isn't as strong as it was in 2024. But it's honestly it's still not the worst defense in the league, which it's very solid. But yeah, there's definitely like reliability that I feel like they're missing a little bit more of in their defense, especially when in a season like how it was, where they had to kind of shuffle the magnets around a lot, which is why it was never really a cohesive defense for last season.
Yeah, because the 20-odd players were Nick Blakey, Dane Rampy, Tom McCartan, and Sam Wicks. Sam Wicks obviously playing his first year in defense. Dane Rampy sort of dropping off a bit. Tom McCartan was okay, I would say. I can't say he had a bad year. I can't say he was one of the defensive powerhouses, though. And Nick Blakey obviously tried to defend a bit. It was mixed results, but his offensive prowess is still there. So, but everything else was just a mixed bag. Riley Bice, Matt Roberts, okay, but sort of turned the ball over a bit on the rebound. And then they were playing players like Callum Mills through the last half of the year. They experimented with a few players like Patton, Mitchell, Hamling even got a few games, although he's looked to drop off a bit. So, yeah, it's just, yeah. Oh, and the Pelican too.
Yes.
Who just had a year, really.
Yeah, a lot of players were kind of just coasting through on this one when things kind of started to fall apart. Just how it is.
Yeah, so moving on to the midfield, and it was technically their best area, but like it's not really that much to write home about either. So their possession time, they managed 41.5 time of possession, percent of the game in possession, 7th in the league. Disposal differential was just solid, 5.9, 8th in the league. Meters gain differential, 9.5, 10th in the league. And the inside 50 differential is 0.7 gain, which is 11th in the league. So they were just getting enough of the ball. When you scale it towards, the bad teams being West Coast, Richmond allowing a lot more, they're probably just against good teams, probably not quite getting enough of the ball. And their disposal also dropped off a bit this year. Disposal efficiency is a 71.7, which is tied 14th in the league. Clanger differential, which is a 3.9 positive, 15th in the league. Turnover differential, 2.3 positive, 14th in the league. Obviously, those two stats, you want less clangers and less turnovers than your opponents. But, as I said, stoppage clearance differential, they were pretty good, as I said, around the ground in that. 2.8, third in the league. Their center clearance was just bang on average, so I didn't really put that in. Their D50 to forward 50 movement was 25.6 to get their ball through that area, which is 5th in the league. Defensive half to forward 50, 34.1, 4th in the league. Opposition D50 to forward 50 was at 21.3, which is 4th in the league. So those things suggest that Sydney still had that really solid structure, preventing movement from when they have time to set up. But, as I said, opponent D half to forward 50 was a bit higher than league average, 30.9, which is 12th in the league, which again normally suggests that you might have a team with a lot of, forward half turnovers, struggling to convert a bit, and which we sort of saw that with their, disposal efficiency and their inside 50 retention rate. Sorry, that wouldn't be inside 50 retention rate, but, just teams that just bang the ball up the field, get intercepted, and then get rebound off back.
Yeah.
Another thing that was solid at, hardball get differential, 1.7 second in the league. They were a pretty big body, and considering that the most in the league was ridiculously high, I think that was St Kilda at like 4 or 5 or something. It was pretty good. Post clearance brown ball kick differential, again, pretty solid. Sydney have always known to be a solid outside team. 2.5, 4th in the league. And then their mark differential is positive enough. 1.4, 9th in the league. So, as I said, still the makings of a solid team. They've definitely got some really good areas in the back half, but they're not very lethal, and they do turn the ball over quite a bit.
Yes, they do. To be fair, I want to say that it probably is a little unfair for me to say this, but I think a lot of the hard work that has come out of the movement stats is to the credit of Isaac Heaney. If it wasn't for him, Sydney probably would not have had as good of a season. This probably would have been a lot worse of a season. Would be a better way of putting it. When Golden came back, that probably did help a lot as well. Same with when Papley came back towards the end of the season. Probably boosted their stats a little bit higher. But yeah, I think Heaney's efforts throughout the entirety of the season probably credit why these stats aren't that bad.
Yeah, and I think the move to Jake Lloyd as a pure-time winger definitely helped, because he did have an awkward start to the season, but he warmed into the role, and I think that's like the best position he plays, because, as I said, they just need a bit more experience on the wing with Goulden being out. They tossed up a few players like Ollie Florent, who sort of had a bit of a off year. Sometimes James Jordan even went a bit wider, but I think his role is definitely more of that hard tagger. And obviously, in that midfield, they're also putting a lot of time into Angus Sheldrick, who's looking to be a pretty solid player. That was a really nice pickup for them. So, still young, still really good midfield. When your oldest player is 29-year-old, I would say that those midfield stats are, all right enough. You're not going to be bodying too many teams with the midfield stats. So the fact that they're not bleeding too much, I think, is pretty good signs.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think this is actually a really well-balanced team. It's just about keeping them all healthy and on the park to ensure you're actually going to get the most out of them.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a bit later, but yeah, as I said, it's like well balanced, but it's just really hard to see where their lethality comes from.
Yeah.
Because again, that forward line hasn't functioned. They're banking on it being Charlie. We'll talk about the list changes in a second. But that defense, as I said, it's going to be interesting whether they, full on go into like that aggressive rebounding defense. Try and get their halfbackers to generate more intercepts and prevent opponents from even getting inside 50, protecting their back six a bit, or whether they look to find another player to sort of fill that role. But we'll have a look at the list changes for 2026 because, again, the players that they did bring in suggest that they're sort of sprinkling ideas to
Yes.
cover some of the flaws of last year.
Yes, and we'll start with the outs as per normal via trade and free agency. Obviously, the big ones being Will Hayward and Ollie Florent going over to Carlton, one via the Curnow trade, of course, and Tom Buller going over to Collingwood. On the delistings, there are Aaron Francis, Robbie Fox. Fun fact, as I just learned today, Robbie Fox was announced as the Tasmania VFL captain. So congratulations to him for being their inaugural captain in the VFL side. Indy Kirk, Blake Liedler, Caleb Mitchell, and Ben Patton. And then on the ends, obviously the big one via trade and free agency is Charlie Curnow, coming over from Carlton. Malcolm Roses Jr. was picked up from the Gold Coast Suns, and Jai Sarong coming over from Hawthorn. On the draft side of things, Harry Kyle was picked up at pick 14 via Academy. Javon Filippo at pick 35, brother to Matthias Filippo at St Kilda. Billy Kuthi at pick 42. The other Max King, the one that's now currently also injured, at pick 49. Noah Chamberlain, a Category B rookie, and Liam Heatherton, also a Category B rookie.
Do you know if Noah Chamberlain's related to Razor Ray? Do you have the family info on that?
I think the last names are
Could
spelled
be.
differently.
Yeah, probably now I'm thinking about it. But yeah, overall, in terms of like the scope of this list, they obviously paid quite a bit to get Charlie Curnow. Again, we'll talk about Will Hayward, how much of a loss that actually is. I think Ollie Florent was definitely tradable, and Tom Buller just as that depth in forwards. I don't think Sydney's in a position where they could really train up another forward. I think they just put too much inefficiencies in their forward line. So I think what they have is what they're going to have for the foreseeable future. Delistings, I think they've got rid of a lot of guff, really.
Yeah.
I don't think any of these losses are overly that is surprising, and they're sort of players that just came in and didn't really have too much of an impact. Ben Patton was a bit disappointing. They tried to give him a lifeline in defence, didn't really happen for him. And what they gained is obviously one of the more promising deep key tall forwards, a really crafty small forward to sort of make up for Hayward, and a key defender that might be for depth and might actually make round one.
Yeah, I know we haven't seen too much of Sarong when he played for Hawthorn, but we know he has a pretty solid talent. So hopefully he'll be able to kind of slot in pretty well with the Sydney side, especially as they're trying to like rejuvenate their backline.
Yeah, exactly. All right, shall we go into the players of importance?
Yes, and as you had briefly mentioned, you did briefly mention Lewis Melican. And so I decided to add in the Pelican to my list of players. He missed a little bit in the early season, but kept his opponents at bay at the second half of 2025. He's always been fairly solid, albeit, can be a little up and down in some areas of defense. If he can get a clean run at it in 2026, I think he'll be important as he gets back to his one-on-one shutdown best. Because that's primarily what he's been good at. His spoil work has also been fairly solid, but probably needs a little bit of cleanup, just a little bit of work, more work done around packs and things like that. But I know one-on-one, he's always been very good.
Yeah. It's I think it's just the best when he gets a tiny bit of support. And they can do that. Obviously, Tom McCartan is a very solid defender. But yeah, as I said, it's just one of those things where, as you mentioned, it's about bringing the ball to ground for them at times, because again, they did play a more of one-on-one style, and their one-on-one figures actually dropped a bit. Lewis Melican had a 33.3% loss rate. Tom McCartan had 27.3. Tom McCartan having 2.2 contests, and Lewis Melican having 1.8 contests per game. So I think it's more about like them fitting into the system that Dean Cox wants.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, sort of getting to the end of the year, they did sort of work it out a bit. Obviously, the one game was obviously that blowout loss against the Giants where things sort of fell apart. But they actually kept their opponents relatively reasonable in the back half of the year.
Yeah, I think it's a very solid assessment. Next on my list is Angus Sheldrick. You did also briefly mention him just before. Taken a few years to find his footing in the midfield, but his work rate has become very fantastic, averaging 4.6 tackles out of the 4 in 20 games that he played last season. His pressure rate and ability to penetrate the ball inside 50 is also fantastic. He's become very, very solid for this midfield team. He's very helpful in supporting Heaney in what Heaney does, and hopefully, with a more healthier side, he will have a lot more playtime, and hopefully will develop into a much better supporting role for Heaney, for Goulden, and just to be able, and even for Jake Lloyd as well on the other wing.
Yeah, as I said, it is really good, and it'll be interesting to see how he develops because I think Sheldrick is one of those players that, again, he's so balanced, like right now, which is really what you want. He's starting to see a few more center bounces, but it will be interesting to see, like, if his clearance work might be able to help Sydney because he doesn't do too badly around the stoppages. I think his lift is why that there was such an even stoppage team. Obviously, taking a lot more contests out the wings. But as I said, if he can develop a bit more of an inner clearance game as he bulks up a bit, I think that might be what Sydney lead because Isaac Heaney, who isn't exactly like a bulldozer, is by far the best first hands on ball clearance winner in terms of center clearances. Warner can do it, is a tiny bit more inconsistent, but is a very good mix up. But as I said, they just don't really have that really big solid contributor, and it's probably why they've actually spent a lot of time diversifying their center bounces. Heaney was actually attended the most center bounces at 74.7, and then the next best was Chaz Warner at 58.9. So they had a very big spread in terms of midfielders attending center bounce.
Yeah, they have quite a wide variety of players who are able to have an impact at the center bounce. But it's all about at this point just getting a ball to your number one and who's normally the more reliable one in getting clearances out.
Not that many players, but it's a very wide distribution, a lot more than you would have in most other teams. But I think it also just says like they really like to get their midfield in attacking positions, which is why, again, we saw a lot of that good link-up play. A lot of them can play an outside role fairly well, so that's why, again, they have some very balanced outside midfield stats. It's just, as I said, maybe arguably a bit more lethality in the inside midfield, but again, you can't have everything as a team.
No, that's very true. And last on my part of the list is Hayden McLean, a versatile key that's contending for that second tall position. We haven't openly kind of talked about it, but that's kind of where it's kind of leading to when it comes to bringing Curnow into this mix. Is that not all of these forwards are obviously going to be able to fit in the one lineup. There is going to be some possible fights for contention. But I think McLean has done fairly well, has come a bit more into his own in this season, even if it wasn't a great season overall. Mostly needs to work on getting cleaner hands and a little bit of pressure work up forward as well.
Yeah, I'd say with McLean is I trust him the most out of those forwards, even though it wasn't a great year for him. He was only kicking at 58.1% accuracy, 25 goals, which is solid, but probably for your key forward, you want a lot more out of that. As I said, their leading goal kicker wasn't even in their forward line. It was Isaac Heaney.
Yeah.
And then they traded away their second highest goal kicker. So again, they're hoping that with Hayden McLean and Curnow, it's not just Curnow kicking all the goals. It's Hayden McLean being able to do a bit more with a bit less pressure on him. And then it is about finding that other player to sort of make up for it. And I'll actually skip ahead a bit because I do talk about the other one, which is Joel Amati. As I said, Curnow is a lock. I think McLean and McDonald will battle it out for the second tile. I am leaning a lot more towards McLean. who knows, they might even run 4. But Amadi has got to hold his importance as a roaming toll forward. He's the only one with pace inside that midfield as a toll, and is a solid inside 50 mark despite him not being the best one-on-one. Has to impact the game in other areas as he is not going to be playing as deep, and it will be a good challenge to see him try and improve his game because he's always just been just a player. Like, he bobs up, kicks a few goals every now and then, but it's just not consistent enough. And I think like a bit of change in position might actually do him well if he's going to have a longevity career.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of those kinds of players who is very versatile in terms of like his leading patterns, in terms of his presentability as a forward. But his impact does lessen when you put him in one-on-one situations, when you try and put him deeper than where he probably should be. Like, because I feel like he's going to have a lot more impact on that half forward line rather than in deep forward, where Curnow will probably have the bigger impact.
Yeah, well, I said if Curnow's leading out, then, as I said, Amadi might do well to sort of take either some of those wider leads to draw out the defenders so Curnow can lead straight, which is definitely his forte, or Amadi, as you said, like roams up to add a bit of a link-up target if they're struggling to find good entries inside 50, which they did struggle to do last year. So, a bit to think about for him, but again, it's so weird, like having 2 key forwards as players of importance when you have Curnow coming in. But as I said, I think what we're trying to say is Curnow coming in gives them a good chance to not only try and get a few more goals, but reset some of their setup, which dropped off a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so finishing off with Matt Roberts, general defender / rebound defender. After a breakout 2024, Roberts had a decent amount of disposal off the halfback line, but some of his poor disposal and decision-making started to hurt as the mature ager Riley Bice looked to step up. I think there is room for both of them if Sydney choose to move on from Cunningham and Lloyd eventually, but an increase in efficiency is a must for him. He just sort of, it was a shame because he has the attributes of a pretty good defender. He is a good link-up, but, as I said, there was a bit of time with Mills out where you thought he might take that role with both hands, but it just didn't quite work out for him. But I wouldn't be too worried because, again, he is only 22 years of age and still producing okay numbers.
Yeah, he's still got plenty of time to have a really strong development period. Again, 2024, he was only 20 years old during that breakout year, so it'll take it'll still got plenty in the tank in terms of development, and I'm sure him and both Riley Weiss could probably fit into their defense. Considering they're still like Dean Cox is still very much fiddling with it for the time being as well.
Yeah, exactly. So overall, these are players that I think, again, with the players that they've brought in, and there'll be a lot talked about it, it's like a good chance for a lot of these sort of decent but not, again, outstanding players to sort of lift, which I think was sort of the theme. Probably discluding Angus Sheldrick, who is pretty much projecting higher than you would expect a player. Except for the rest, it's just sort of about finding the footing again. Obviously, who are these new faces we're talking about? If you haven't heard, Charlie Curnow is now a Swan. I know the media hasn't really mentioned it at all, so it might be a surprise for some of you. But yeah, Sydney have been longing for a better key forward output for a long time, probably since probably even the Tipper era, or Ben Reid, like he wasn't the best, but he was still providing a lot. And Buddy Franklin. He was sort of a good player, I guess. But it's still yet to be seen if Sydney will change their system for him. But they will get better conversion from a lot of their back half movement with him in it, and it was already pretty solid. So I think that's just it's pretty easy to say that this is just a net positive for the Swans. Malcolm Roses Jr. also rounds out that forward line, small forward. With Papley's absence in 2025 having a huge impact on their ground level game, Rose Jr. is a cheap depth option, looking to sell his spark, distribution, and pressure to a lackluster Swans ground unit. Will need to clean up his ball use, though. He was often a player where if he got the ball on the half forward line, he was at risk of just burning it to a pretty mediocre entry. But that might lift with some of the better key forward targets that they've got to work with. And plus, they've got a good halfback outside rebounder, so he might just be able to chip it back to someone on the 50-meter arc, like the Swans often like to do. Try and make them a few easier kicks for him, and that might elevate his game. Finishing off now, Jai Sarong, key defender, bit of a beanpole, but a strong unit that is a bit slow and vulnerable 1-on-1. Never really had a chance to prove himself, and will have filled out a bit more as he hits 23 this year. So I think he will improve his ability to play deep and maybe allow Blakey to move up the ground and focus more on his rebound. As I said, I think it's still a good pickup for the Swans. I think slotting him into the best 22 is, I wouldn't say risky. It's sort of a necessity at this point, but it's not great that they're having to play such a unproven player, but it is exciting to see him get a shake at it. If you've never seen Jai Sarong too, he is much taller than his brother. He is 190, I think 5 centimeters tall, might be 198.
He might be
193.
He might be younger than Caleb, but he did get the better heights gene, which is why he kind of sits like a key defensive role, or a key role, much more better than like a midfielder role that his brother's taken.
Yeah, so I think it's like 15 centimeters over Jai. I think Jai's like
Caleb.
Caleb. I think Caleb's like 178, so a bit of difference there. So overall, 3 really nice names. As I said, it's really, I guess, with that, because a lot of the focus will be on the forward line, is adding Curnow and Roses enough to make up for the fact that, they lose their second best goal kicker and are going to have to play a lot differently to how they played in 2025, because their offense was really focused on going in deep a bit and then kicking it out to players like Hayward and Heaney, who were threatening around that 40 to 50 meters outside from goal line.
It's going to be very interesting to see how they change things up. Bringing Curnow in kind of implies that they're going to go a more traditional forward line route of like having that number 1 key forward do a lot of the heavier conversion lifting. But obviously bringing in Roses Jr. Will allow him and like Papley to have a lot better effectiveness on ground level, and hopefully with the roaming tools, it'll allow them to have a little bit more flexibility as to what kind of angles they'll be able to take in terms of penetration on the inside 50.
Yeah, because we've seen Dean Cox take a more fundamental approach on the defense, and again, it was bet not break, but I said for the players there, not bad stats. So, as I said, maybe this is just like a soft reset into the more, maybe a more traditionalist football style that Dean Cox might want to play. And if they do want to do that, they have some pretty nice pieces there now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to Reasons of Optimism after already that nice little thing. As I mentioned, Charlie is a huge swing to their forward line, and their outside game will return to full force once Golden returns to the lineup. Heaney can focus on purely mid-work if he chooses to, and Mills already improves their solid back half rebound if he plays a full season. Near the top of the team league in terms of an attacking midfield that isn't just bullying from the center square. Like, they are a pretty wide range of attacking as their style.
Yeah, the midfield does have a lot of flexibility, and they don't have to add players to that. They just have to rotate the ones that they already have, because they have so many players that can play multiple roles, even though a lot of that midfield is actually still quite young, which is really
still quite young. And it's got defensive depth too. Like, they run both ways. Like, for such an attacking-minded midfield, they still manage to do defensive actions fairly well. They intercept an okay rate. As I said, the defense from stoppages, they're normally fairly keen. Obviously, Grundy is a really big component of that, and we saw that through the back half of the year.
Yes.
But yeah, as I said, it's just one of the cleanest sort of lineups in terms of that midfield.
Yeah, even though like we barely talked about him at all, like having Grundy in this midfield as the key rock makes such a huge difference to them as a whole. And we saw that in the 2024 and 2025 season, just how big of an impact he's able to have on field.
Yeah, and with the new ruck rules, like you might actually see crafty older ruckmen sort of have a bit more longevity. Who knows? Maybe we'll see the return of Todd Goldstein. But yeah, as I said, it's it's interesting to see what he'll do with the new rules and whether that will boost their impact from the center a bit more.
Yeah, essentially, like, even though the backline is still a little bit of a jigsaw, I think Sydney's become a very well-rounded team once more, bringing in Curnow and Rosas Jr. just to kind of flesh out the forward line. It allows them better opportunities in terms of, obviously, as I just mentioned, penetration inside 50, allows them to take wider angles because they'll have the talent to be able to have those angles accessible. And it also allows Sydney's defense to prepare better against dangerous opposing forwards because their forward line is it will become a very dangerous forward line to deal with. So it allows them in practices to be able to prepare a lot better because the 2025 practices clearly weren't up to scratch.
Because it's all well and good, like coming back to the center, like hitting up Heaney on the 40 meters out directly in front. But the obvious problem is if you do get a turnover, and they do have some ball burners, you are opening up the middle on a rebound, on a turnover, which can expose your defense a bit. And as we've seen, like when Sydney can defend their defense by midfield pressure, they look really, really good. But yeah, as I said, getting higher forward conversion will help a lot in that. And I think that's a really good insight for where they might actually improve despite not really picking up too many players in that back line.
Yeah, like as long as their defense is like somewhat dependable, which it seems like it's going to be now that they can they're finally over like the big injury hurdles. Then they should have a much better time dealing with the ball at ground level, dealing with penetration from long kicks, and hopefully some really solid rebound, provided they're able to keep Blakey in defense and not have him like push up into the forward line.
Yeah, as I said, it's a defense where it's like I would never pick it. Like I would say it's like a bottom 6 defense that you would pick on paper, maybe just above. I haven't really ranked them, but it's like I'm not that worried about the Swans' defensive stats in 2026. I think they'll still be all right there. What we are worried about, we should move on to reasons for pessimism. And I think it's that Sydney just have such a huge swing in their best and worst on-field performers, where I think the big names sort of carry this team a bit too hard as soon as things don't go their way. Not many young players are really looking to break out onto this side, probably barring Sheldrick. And yeah, as the fringe players are getting older, and some of their fringe players are getting older. So if their older players underperform, or sort of more veteran talent, I should say, or injured, Sydney may continue to languish in the middle of the pack a bit more. It is really a bit of a depth issue.
Yeah, I kind of basically say the same thing, that they're still relying a lot on their veterans and older talent. Obviously, some of them, like Rampy and Mills, have been injured for a lot of... They were injured for a lot of 2025, so they didn't feature too much. But again, you're talking about your Heaney's, Papleys, Amadi when he popped up here and there, even though he hasn't been in the system for too long. Like, he's basically considered one of the bigger names at Sydney at the moment. You know, obviously Blakey, he's still quite young, but he's one of the bigger names in their defense, and that sort of thing. Like, they're relying too much on these sort of players when you need to, which it looks like they are doing, need to let the younger players who are trying to be a lot more involved into becoming the best 22 develop. And injuries definitely allowed them some of that opportunity in 2025, but 2026 will be kind of the year to really test your depth, test your system, and hopefully take a little bit of the stress off of a player like Heaney, who seems like he's like almost at his wit's end after losing 3 grand finals.
Yeah, like it's hard because like private school boy Isaac Heaney, like life's probably been pretty good for him so far. But yeah, as I said, he's just always been a bit of a tease away from success, despite, it's a bit like Petrarca before he won his premiership. Like, despite Amez carrying his team for a few years, he hasn't ever got them to the taste of a premiership. I will say, yeah, like you said with the injuries, like, you can say other things about coming back. Like, we saw how much they dropped off when they were having to rely on players. Like, the 14 games that Corey Warner had to play, Tom Hanley in that forward line, like, they just did not produce at all. Try to replace Papley or anything. So, as I said, it's just that really big drop off. I will say the only one that showed a bit of promise was Braden Campbell. He had a few really decent games. Still not the best ball user, but yeah, he had some solid games. But yeah, it's just a really big drop off, especially in that forward line, especially in defense, and even in the midfield. You know what I mean? It's not like they had to test too many players. Like, if they had a major midfield injury, that would be still having a hit. Not as big a drop off as other areas. Obviously, they're very versatile in their midfielder, in their midfield, but they don't exactly have a young talent outside of Sheldrick coming through.
Yeah, and it's a positive and a negative that they do have decent midfielders already. Thankfully, they've got some fantastic players on the wings. Obviously, Lloyd, having moved over there in 2025, seems to be looking pretty good. Obviously, you've got Goulden, already a fantastic player. Don't have to worry too much about him. But just, trying to keep a consistent core in that midfield, even though you have so much flexibility, will probably be better in the long run rather than short term.
Yeah, because talking about the long run, they do need to develop a player because, they spent their first 2 draft picks on midfielders in Kuti and Philippou. And you know what I mean? It's just, I think it's a bit concerning how they just don't have those 1 or 2 players that you can think, oh, they might, develop into something. A lot of them, I've already got a feeling that they might not develop into players. So, again, it's about unearthing a couple of diamonds as well.
Yes,
because,
absolutely.
as I said, for the long-term future, yeah, they will languish if they don't, find at least another key back position, and maybe a midfielder in the next few years.
Yeah.
But that's a bit more long-term.
Yeah, that'll be something
What
we
about
can
this
talk
year?
about, like in further down this season, later on, maybe towards the end.
So the overall view of this year, what do I think? I think Cox had a lot of hard truths about Sydney in 2025, especially defensively. But they do have some guns to work with. I'm not really sold as a list as a whole concept, but they should be managed to get back in and around pushing back into finals. I've got a very small range for them because I do believe their top end talent is just going to carry them for a lot this season. But I don't think they'll have that. Again, it'll be like this season where I don't think they'll have that lethality. I'm going to put them to 8 to 12. I think it's sort of a pathway season where this year is either going to put them back on track, or that maybe this Curnow move is going to be like a bit of a too much scotch tape. You know what I mean? I think that they might fall off a cliff if they don't unearth 1 or 2 more players, which is a bit concerning. But again, that's just too much in the future to worry about now. As for now, I think they're just going to make the most out of what they've got, and what they've got is definitely capable to making finals.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they're in a position where they are able to punch back up into finals contention. Whether that means they'll have to put themselves in the same position as they did in 24 and make a grand final again, that remains to be seen. But considering all of the other teams and how much they've improved over the off season, not to mention you've got some teams that are just always in finals at the moment, so you've got those as well to work with. But I think the direction they're heading is very positive. Again, they shouldn't be in a position where they have to majorly rebuild anytime soon because they still have quite a young sort of list. Like where their veteran talent isn't even pushing 30 yet, which is kind of crazy to think about. Although they're kind of close, but you know what I mean. So they're definitely in a right position, but they're not.
The good thing is they're really old players are already taking a reduced role anyway.
Yeah.
Because, Brody Grundy is sort of the leader of their core players at 31, and then everyone older than him is Cunningham. Lloyd, he's useful but taking a reduced role. Taylor Adams is probably not going to get him back into the side.
Yeah.
Joel Hamling, he just isn't really fit enough for AFL football, it looks like. And Dane Rampy, who again is taking a more reduced role, probably is going to be his last year.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of their core players are all under 30 and like having more of an impact. And I guess the older players are more of like leadership figures kind of at this point, which isn't
Yeah,
a
it's
bad
just
thing at
getting
all.
one or two players to replace Rampy and Lloyd, I would say.
Yeah. Which hopefully the younger crop of players they brought in might be able to be molded into that. Otherwise, end of this season will be where they kind of look for those sorts of roles. But I do agree. They should be pushing finals again this year. And if they don't, then it'll be. I won't say it's another tumultuous season. I'll just think it's maybe a little bit more, just a little bit disappointing. But maybe they're just not. Maybe this team just wouldn't be ready for kind of the game plan that Cox is going with. But who knows?
Yeah, it's so weird. It's almost like Carlton, but at the same time, it's almost not Carlton. You know what I mean? Like when you say, oh, a team that like relies a bit too much on their stars and all that sort of stuff. But like the difference between Carlton and Sydney is like Sydney's almost the opposite. They focus so much on the outside game, on the outside pressure, that they're, trade off a bit of lethality in the midfield, inside midfield, I should say. Whereas Carlton, were so heavily involved in the inside midfield and just struggled off halfbacks. So it is, for how much I like of the more balanced structure, there is a bit to say that, at the end of the day, you do have to generate score in what you do. And it's, even though Curnow is a good goal kicker, there's no doubts on his talent. It's just like, how is his style going to change? Because again, with Carlton, he was one of the most targeted forwards in the competition. And Sydney don't exactly play that way. They are a wide distribution team with a lot of offensive options. So, as I said, I don't think Charlie's going to win the Brownlow, but I think he's going to have a lot of positive impact. It's just, again, seeing how exactly he integrates is probably one of the more interesting prospects in 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to have a much bigger impact. Not just necessarily in terms of like conversion and stuff, but I think he provides also a lot of on-field leadership, which is also probably a little bit of something they're missing up in that forward line. So his seniority will definitely also help a long way in that regard. But that does bring us to the end of the preseason analysis episode for the Sydney Swans. Thank you all so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and just coming and hang out with us in this one. Next up will be the Western Bulldogs. I know I said we would technically be doing these alphabetically, but I feel like it's neither here nor there, whether we do West Coast or the Dogs. I don't think it really matters. So we're doing the Dogs next. Stay tuned for that one, because I think that one will be really, really good to talk about. Because, we've talked about this already kind of at length. The Dogs are a team that should be making finals and are just always missing by the barest of margins. So we're going to talk about why that is. But I already have failed my way into turning this into a proper outro. I don't know where I'm going with this, so I'm just going to cut myself off here and say thank you all so much, and we will see you all next time. So until then, take care.